Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning, friends of the media, friends from the community, friends in the legislature. We have several individuals from the community who've come out to in support of the, thank you very much, of the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. Today we're going to bring a few speakers forward in celebration of that march. We wanted to acknowledge the people who are standing behind me in the community, as I said, and in the legislature who've come out to support that. Our first speaker, and I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Tony Perez. I'm the Legislative and Labor Industry Chair for the Prince George's County branch of the NAACP. Our first speaker today will be Mr. Bob Ross, the President of the Prince George's NAACP. Bob Ross he has a history of being a part of the first March on Washington. So Bob has brought us out here today in support of that. Bob?
Thank you, Tony. I want to thank all the elected officials for coming out. Our State President, Gerald Stanberg. This is truly a moment in history that's about to repeat itself again 50 years later. And this morning, as I was getting ready to prepare to come down, I went back to 1963. And what was I doing in 1963? And during that summer prior, from June, I worked at a camp in Pennsylvania called Camp Mincy. It was a Boy Scout camp. And while we was there, we went downtown to a movie in Strattlesburg, Pennsylvania. And that movie was a segregated movie. And I'm from Philadelphia. I had never experienced that. So we had to go to the top of the balcony and watch the movie. And then on our way home, we had to walk back to the camp. It's probably about 3 miles back. A car passed by us and called us a bunch of niggers. And then we shot back at him and said, "Your mother." Next thing you knew, the car turned around and we dove into the woods and waited until the car left. So when we got back to the camp and went into our cottage, Mr. Henderson, who was the head chef, knocked on the door, and he had the state trooper with him and said, "Were we downtown?" And we said yes, and we indicated what had happened. And they said, "Well, you can't go downtown no more for the rest of the summer." And when I came back in August, my mother then was preparing to go to the march, and we went down to the march. And I'm going to fast forward to 2013. Our office is so busy with complaints that are coming in about discrimination, police, racial profiling. But the one last Monday really drove the issue home. And everyone said, is the NAACP still relevant today? And the answer to that question is yes, yes, yes. A young girl came into the office, 24 years old, face swollen up, left arm broken. And as she explained to me what had happened while she was traveling in D.C. and what occurred, which is under investigation by us, it just took back somewhere, and she was called the N-word in 2013. And we thought it was a hate crime, and we're still looking at that. It just says, yes, we still need the NAACP, SCLC, National Action Network, all those organizations. That's why we are marching on August 24th in the Capitol to remind people our issues are not done. We had the voting right that was put back with the Supreme Court decision. We had affirmative action that was set back with the Supreme Court's decision. We have stop and frisk in New York. That's why we are marching in 2013 on August 24th. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Our next speaker is from our very own Prince George's County, the chair of the Prince George's County Council, Andrea Harrison.
Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
What a beautiful day to be here. What a beautiful year to celebrate 50 years in the making. But I'm very proud to participate in this special event this morning, mobilizing Prince Georgians as we prepare for the most sacred occasion, and that's the 50th anniversary of this historic March on Washington. I do want to first thank the Prince George's County chapter of the NAACP and its president, Mr. Bob Ross, and also the chairs of the Maryland State Conference Mobilization. Your hard work and dedication to this effort deserves our support, our recognition, and our gratitude. Those who have assembled here this morning truly represent the diversity and rich history of our county, and it reminds us of those who stood for freedom and justice in that first March on Washington 50 years ago. Now, while some people can say that they were there, some of us can say that we were there in spirit, some of us can say we were just buns in the oven at that time, but it's certainly a wonderful opportunity. It's a tremendous opportunity to revisit that hot day in August 50 years ago, almost like today, to celebrate the spirit and the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the individuals and organizations who gave rise to the civil rights movement. I stand before you today because of their sacrifice and conviction, and I am deeply, deeply, and truly grateful. We remember with ease the words of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as he announced to the nation and the world in magnificent oratory, "I have a dream." These words paved the way for the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. But I recall something else that Dr. King said that day, and that's what I want to take a moment to share with you. In that famous "I Have a Dream" speech, Dr. King posed an important question, asking, "When will you be satisfied?" It was a question, he said, being asked of those devoted to the civil rights struggle. And then he gave us an answer. "We're not satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream." Here's my question for you this morning. Have we, in fact, become satisfied? Some will say that with the election of an African-American president and African-American leadership here in Prince George's County, that the victory is won and the struggle is over. Would Dr. King agree with you that now the time has satisfied and that we are complacent and comfortable? Would he say that we've reached economic parity? How would he feel about predatory lending and foreclosures? Would Dr. King find things much different from the poverty of his time upon the visit of some of today's neighborhoods? Maybe the "for whites only" signs are gone, but other not so visible signs stand in the way of fairness and equality of all. Many of us go into our estate homes with our Mercedes-Benz and what do you call those things? Lexus and Range Rovers in our driveways, and then we put our head down and walk away from the young boy who has a hoodie on. We're all upset about Trayvon Martin being killed by a white man, but we don't talk about the young men who are being killed right here in our own neighborhoods. We all want to go overseas and feed the poor, but nobody wants to go down to Kentland and get the homeless people in the woods. I'm asking you, are we satisfied today? Do we have what the economic parity? We were complaining about when whites wouldn't let us go here and go there, but yet we don't want the young people who may have their pants down or may not be dressed appropriately to come into our places of business. How many of us are complaining about them but are not taking the time to talk to them and tell them what's right to wear, or even taking them to the store to buy them a suit, a shirt and a tie and some slacks so they can go on an interview? Are we satisfied?
No. Take your time. Take your time.
We must rediscover the common purpose that brought us together 50 years ago, and the love that allowed for unity and strategy, value sharing, and the building of vibrant communities. In a sermon on March 31st, 1969 at the National Cathedral in Washington, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. made what was his last public proclamation. 4 days later, he was killed by an assassin's bullet. The sermon was called Remaining Awake in a Great Revolution. He preached, one of the great liabilities of life is that all too many people find themselves living amid a time of social change, and yet they fail to develop the new attitudes, the new mental responses that the situation demands. They end up sleeping through a revolution. That great revolution is taking place in our world, our nation, and in Prince George's County. And it begs the question, when will you be satisfied? It is not a matter of how far we have come. We've certainly come a long way since the turbulent 60s, but we still have a long path to travel to realize the dream, and Prince Georgians must remain awake during the revolution. Dr. King was a Baptist preacher. So let's go to the book of Genesis for a moment, chapter 37. And when he saw him from afar, even before he had come near them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said to one another, Behold, the dreamer cometh. Now come, therefore, let us slay him. We will cast him into some old pit and say that some evil beast has devoured him. And we shall see what becomes of his dream. Martin Luther King was a young man. College at 15. He was 26 years old, the age of my son, when his face first appeared on the cover of Time magazine. 35 when he won the Nobel Peace Prize. 39 on the afternoon of his assassination. Knowing how young he was really helps us to fully appreciate his capacity and his indignation over the absence of justice. He was an ordinary man called upon to perform an extraordinary mission. We, too, are ordinary people called to do extraordinary things, and we are desperately in need of men and women here in Prince George's County who are never satisfied. Who will stand up and speak for that which is right? And who will fight back against that which is wrong? Who, when fear comes, will reply as Martin Luther King did while in the Birmingham jail? Now is not the time. This is your rallying call. We can become a greater world, a greater nation, and an even greater Prince George's County by creating a society where all our people can reach their full potential. That is justice and righteousness. Let's all plan to participate in the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. Each one, bring one. Encourage young and old, rich and poor. We can be the fiery spirit of strength, courage, and determination that the world witnessed 50 years ago. Let us become the dream. God bless you. God bless everyone. And I expect that I will see each and every one of you on the mall. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce the executive of Prince George's County, the one who has said that we will take this county from great to greater, Mr. Rashern L. Baker III.
Well, I want to thank the chair. I didn't know she was a preacher. Now we know. I am so glad to be here and to join you. The state's attorney and I were just meeting with our public safety officials and talking about the progress we're making here in Prince George's County. I know the sheriff is down here also, who's done a great job. But it just reminded us as we were walking or taking the elevator down here about how far we've come, but also how far we have to go. That is really what this celebration of 50 years of struggle is about. That's why we need everyone to come out there to celebrate the march and to join us. Because as I often remind my children, who grew up in a much different world than their grandparents, that it didn't happen by accident. It happened because people were willing to sacrifice, not those who got their names in the paper, but those who gave up their jobs, who lost their jobs, who gave up time to march, to sit in, to make sure that we had the opportunity to be county executive, to be state's attorney, to be sheriff, to be the chair of the council. They gave a lot, and we have to give back. And as I close with one of my favorite sayings, you know, Harriet Tubman said, when somebody asked her, how many slaves did you free? She said, I freed 1,000, but I could have freed more if they only knew they were slaves. I freed 1,000, but I could have freed more if they only knew they were slaves. That is what this is about. It's about remembering. So I want to thank you. We want to see you out there, as the chair said. In fact, I want her not to be able to see you. There's so many people that come from Prince George's County, she can't even find y'all in the crowd because there's going to be so many.